All right. Well, thank you, Anamika, for being here today. Really excited to hear your stories and insights on this podcast. We've had so many great guests with us, and I'm really excited you agreed to join us here because I feel like staff and the job seekers who have been watching this podcast are looking for unique insights because everyone's journey is a little different. So the first question I always like to ask our guests is about your own journey. What sorts of things have you done that have gotten you to where you are today? And if you don't mind telling us about some of those highlights, I think that would be an awesome way to start.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you, Imran, for inviting me to this podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been watching a lot of content that you've created, and so thank you for that. My name is Anamika Vajpeyi, Misra, and I'm a clinical psychologist and psychiatric social worker. I practice here in the UAE and have been blessed to work with one of the biggest organizations here in the country. So, it's a pleasure to be here. Now, you asked what has been my journey, professional journey. I started as a clinical psychologist. That has always been my passion. And I wanted to understand mental health, mental well being, and try to find ways by which we can make the lives of those who are suffering from any mental health issues better. So it started with that. I started practicing after graduating from my master's degree and realized that I'm limited in certain ways when it comes to taking care of my clients, because as a psychologist, I was just basically doing one-to-one counseling, but the issues were rooted in a lot of real life stuff, which was happening outside my clinic. And that's where I began to feel there's a gap. So I took another leap into education and this time decided to pursue an MPhil degree in social work from TIS in Mumbai. And that was an eye opener because the program was amazing. I got to understand how do we understand people in their systems and then in their environments. And so began the journey of me being an eclectic mental health professional. That's what I like to call myself now, wherein I can integrate a lot of modalities, keeping the client in the center of it and trying to understand what is it that they are suffering from, where is it coming from, and then trying to figure out ways by which I can devise a plan with client to help them out the best, So that was quite a journey for me because I had to break certain myths. Like there's a hierarchy in a mental health scenario, and mental health professionals who are watching this might agree. I hope I'm not being controversial, but then psychiatrists are up there, then have your clinical psychologists, and you've got clinical social workers, and then allied mental health professionals. And so when I said that I want to do my MPhil in social work, my professors and my colleagues were like, but why? You are already a psychologist. And one thing that I always believe in is we all have a different paths, right? Career paths. And they are coming from our understanding of how best we want to perfect our craft and help out our clientele, whichever field we are in. So there shouldn't be any barriers, any mental barriers, I mean to say, when it comes to pursuing what you really want to do. Because more innovative you are, I believe more effective you become because you are offering something different and something unique to your client. And I'm proud to say that I think my journey allowed me to look at mental health from a much broader lens than it would have if I would have just practiced as a clinical psychologist. Nothing wrong with being that,
No,
but you can be so much more than that.
I see. Well, that is a really interesting way to approach your career, Anamika, because it's something I've seen firsthand as well as, I've gone through my own career journey. My background is in engineering, but I spent a
Oh,
lot of time working on the factory floor. So actually assembling some of the CAD designs and drawings that we would develop in the studio. And so many
oh,
times, you know, if you didn't spend time working with the people that those designs were made for, you would miss things because you might not have had to try and assemble it yourself. And so
Mhm.
there were many times where, in the software, that piece, goes in its spot perfectly. But when you try to, use your hand and put that piece in place, there's no space. So I think it makes a lot of sense to, you know, try these different roles and kind of ignore that hierarchy and just understand the space as a whole. I can see a lot of benefit coming from that. And was there was there a pivotal moment for you that made you feel like, yeah, that was the right decision? Was there anything specific that comes to mind that made you go, yeah, this was the right move for me?
Yeah. So I believe that once I began to have a more eclectic practice, I could see many ways by which I could help a variety of different clienteles in a variety of different settings. So I could work with child protection and safeguarding, applying principles of psychology mixed with clinical social work. I could work very well with women and children suffering from, say, domestic abuse or familial issues. I also saw myself being able to work with clients coming with specific acute mental health issues. So I think it broadened my field of
Mhm.
work and it enabled me to do more. So there was not a specific pivotal moment or one particular client who just changed everything. This was more like over the period of time as I was observing myself. So there's something very specific to our field, which we call SPSR, self practice and self reflection. So as you practice, you take out a lot of time to reflect whether I'm practicing my craft correctly? Am I applying the tools that I have at my disposal? Is any gap in the practice? So more reflection I did, more introspection I did, I realized that this is not enough, right? And if I feel as a practitioner that there needs to be something more, then it's my duty to improve my competence,
I see.
right? I took that accountability and ownership and I worked on it. And that's where, like, yeah, I had to defy certain myths or cross certain barriers and, convince myself that I need to spend another 2 years to pursue an MPhil program. But I would say it was worth it because I knew I could see value in what I'm doing. And that was all that I wanted. So overall, I think it was a good decision.
That makes sense. Yeah, that it's not just one moment, but sort of the journey as a whole that makes it feel right for you. And I've actually heard from quite a few of the other guests I've had that mental health, of course, plays a massive role in the career paths of many of the clients that, um, seek resources and support. Whether and at varying degrees as well, depending on, um, how significant their challenges might be. Do many of your clients come to you looking for guidance around their career journey as well, while they try to work through some of their mental health concerns?
Okay, so to answer that question, let me also take you briefly through my career journey. So
Yeah.
I started as a clinical practitioner, and from there I went and started because I was getting a lot of consultancy roles. So I began to work a lot into as an expert in recruitment panels. I began to do employee well-being, being a mental health professional because I'm talking about 2005, 2006 when employee well-being had just began to be recognized in UAE to a certain extent. So certain organizations, I wouldn't take names here, but certain very good organizations began to offer workshops to their employees. And so I began to get more involved into that. So I
Gotcha.
work with organizations such as Air Ferguson, Deloitte, and many others
Wow.
to design certain programs for mental well-being of employees, right? As a consultant. So that was a bit of a shift from being just a clinical practitioner because now I'm working more or less like a work psychologist, right? And
Yeah.
so that gave me a different insight. And from there, I went to higher education where I found myself training counselors and social workers.
Yeah.
So till recently, I was heading the social work program for one of the federal government universities here with multiple campuses across the country. And my drive was always to help them understand how important it is um, to find your own path and to understand that we have a generalist practice which should be applicable to so many different settings. So why I told about this journey is because more I went into all these different roles and settings, I realized that workplace stress is a bigger issue than we recognize. See, we spend almost 60-70% of our lives at our workplaces. I'm talking about adult life, working life, and we are active, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or doing something which is related to work. So even if it is professional development or whatever, somewhere it's all kind of connected to your workspace, right? So
Mhm.
if majority of my life I'm spending at a particular setting, wouldn't I want that to be a place which has a growth mindset, um, which promotes me for my expertise and my abilities, right? But that's not really what's happening at workplaces.
Right.
So, like this morning, I was having a conversation on LinkedIn with a fellow professional, and we were talking about how narcissistic personalities at workplace actually make it very difficult for employees and colleagues, and even superiors sometimes, to really deliver what they mean to deliver. And it's a very detrimental kind of colleague or a leader to have to work with,
Yeah.
because it really affects the person's mental health to its core, because how they work is by challenging your integrity, by challenging your self-confidence, your self-image, right? And then they have these people pleasers who we call flying monkeys, who basically trying to gratify themselves by being in good books of this narcissistic leader.
Oh,
And that creates a different level of chaos, because they have a malign campaign against this person, who they usually have targets, and targets usually are the people who are really really capable, who are the doers, who actually perform, but that itself is a threat to the narcissist leader. I hope
interesting.
I'm clear. And so that creates a very toxic work culture. Add to this some imposter leaders who are not very secure into their being and who don't really understand the need of others. They're so insecure that they begin to surround themselves with people pleasers, many of who would be narcissistic employees, because they are very good at reading people and they very well read this gap in confidence, right? And then they begin to take advantage of it by being leaders in proxy, and then they are actually running their own campaign. And so many times you've seen organizations being, brought to the ground because such leaders or employees actually create such a negative work environment that you would see that actually the doers and capable employees begin to leave the organization or compromise their mental health if they don't have that option. Not everybody has an option to just get up and leave, right? So people began to say that, well, I need to have the grit, I need to develop my resilience, which is the only way to actually face this. But it comes at a cost, right? Again, remember, 60-70% of your time
Yeah.
day is being spent at workplace. So this is a huge issue. And when I began to work in employee well-being space, I began to notice this way more, because people would come and share their stories. And being a mental health professional, obviously I'd be analyzing what's happening, and I began to see a pattern. Organization after organization, scale after scale, doesn't matter which level of hierarchy you're in, each person had that struggle. So I think something has gone very wrong in the work culture of today, where it is all about very self-centered, very toxic kind of approach towards work, right?
Yeah.
Success, success at cost of anything, but success always comes at a cost, right?
Yeah.
It's free. So what is the cost you're ready to pay for it? So when it comes to imposter leaders or narcissist leaders, or there are many other kinds who are not very supportive or collaborative kind of leadership, I would like to ask them, have they tried anything else? Maybe there are different ways to do what they want to achieve, right? So there are many paths, maybe some more positive ways, by building up your team, ground up, building their confidence, being a, like, I know managers whom I would look up to them. I would even give them a call if I'm caught into something, because I know that they are supportive of me, right? So what's wrong with being that kind of leader, where you'd be actually regarded by people, actually respected by your team? And when it comes to employees, I often think that you have to make choices, hard choices sometimes. Nothing is more important than your mental health. So if you are in a workspace where you begin to feel that this is costing me my mental peace, it's costing me my family time, it's costing me my health, maybe it is time to take that hard decision.
I'm glad you, well, first of all, thank you for those insights, Anamika, because I feel like that's something that people might be experiencing without knowing the cause. You know, you just start to feel burnt out, like you hear, or you start to hear about quiet quitting. And it sounds to me like those things could sometimes be the result of a workplace like that, you know. But if you've been in it for a while, if you don't have even just the terminology to articulate what you might be feeling in the workplace, I think it could feel very vague, a very vague sense of discomfort, um, that starts to, seep into an employee's sort of mental well-being. Um, and it might be a tough question, so maybe I might need to try and phrase this a couple of different ways, but I'm basically wondering if there's anything we can provide employees with to identify that they're in a workplace like that. Are there questions that we could recommend they ask themselves to kind of identify, is it that they need to be more resilient? Is this a matter of mind over matter, or is it that they are in a workplace that might not be the right environment for them? Or how do we figure that out? If we feel that sense of discomfort, but we're not sure where it comes from.
Mm. So first of all, let's touch upon a very interesting concept you mentioned, quiet quitting. So
Hmm.
let's start understanding how to approach this. To approach this, we need at least two stakeholders in this whole scenario, the employer and the employee, right? So first of all, the organizations need to understand the cost when they are not taking care of the employees and the workplace settings become really toxic and the work culture becomes negative. One of the impact of this is quiet quitting. And quiet quitting is when an employee is present at work physically, but mentally they begin to detach themselves from the work. So the passion, the grit, the gravitas that goes into creating something is lost. Why? Because you don't feel appreciated, and that's the only way you can give it back, right? You're human
Yeah.
beings. Yeah. So quid pro quo. You don't respect me. I don't care about your work. So I'm going to show up. I'm going to tick all the boxes, right? But I'm going to wait till 4 p.m. before I send that email. I'm going to delay the work, make it sound like a lot of work, and then deliver it of a sub quality, those kind of things. So that's what quiet quitting is. And it is costing the organization, right? Now, that
Absolutely.
cannot be resolved by micromanagement, which is what most of the organizations resort to. So, first of all, breaking the myth that employees are lazy, that employees are incompetent. Please, let's recognize that you have hired these people. So, unless your hiring process was really substandard, you have hired people of quality. So, first of all, build that trust in yourself. And that would actually release the need for micromanagement,
Right.
which actually feeds into this whole thing that we're talking about of toxic work environment and cultures. Then begin to build the team. It costs way more to rehire a person than to train a person, right? So put those costs. When an organization begins to put a number to this, put a cost to this, they begin to understand how important it is for them to retain the team and to, lower down their turnover of employees.
Yeah.
So that way, you build a team which is going to stay with you, which is going to be loyal, which is going to put in that extra bit of effort because they see benefit in it. When we talk about the new generation workers, they want a balance, right?
Yeah, which is fair.
Being 8 hours at work is not a parameter of excellence, right? I could be way more productive in first 4 hours, and then I might actually benefit from going to the gym for an hour, and I might come back, recharge, and I'm ready to give in another 2, 3 hours of good quality work. So
So
bringing in
true.
flexibility, hybrid workspaces where people can decide when is it that they need to travel for 2 hours, 3 hours, to reach their workplace. Can they actually
Yeah.
put these hours into doing something from home and maybe come to work 2 or 3 days a week?
Right.
It again boils down to trust. Do you trust your hiring process? Do you trust the people that you have hired? Because at the end of the day, we as workers of this workforce want to excel, right? Most of us would want to actually actualize our potential, to become something in our own eyes more than anything else. So why not create that kind of culture where we can, right? So that's one part of it, where the organizations understand that if I do not correct this, it's going to lead to quiet quitting. It's going to lead to more mental health days taken off, unhealthy employees, low morale, and all of this is going to have a negative impact on the productivity, which is not what I want. That's not what I seek. That's not my KPI, right?
Right.
Now comes the other stakeholder, which are employees. And employees need to understand that they can take charge of their own lives. We are adults. We can draw boundaries. We can reflect certain emotions and feelings back to the person, and bring that culture of reflection, listening, collaboration, support into our workplaces. Because we can't keep quitting, right? That's the reality of life. We just cannot keep quitting. So we have to also develop that resilience, that grit, that ability to see through things and take certain steps. And I do a lot of this kind of coaching when I'm working with professionals, sometimes C-suite professionals who are higher up in the leadership. And a lot of our, talk therapy is around these kind of issues where we're actually discussing things about how to build that team, how to be that person in the organization who can bring about that positive change.
Yeah.
And each one of us can do that in our own little ways, right? And more of us who do it, culture comes from people, right?
It's true.
Organizations are people centered, unless AI takes over, and then that's a completely different topic that we need to do podcast on.
Yes.
But it's us, and we are capable people, so we can. So if these two stakeholders begin to work simultaneously, oh my God, we'll see this beautiful world where people are not working only for money. Don't get me wrong, we all need to work for money,
For sure.
but so much more to what we do, right? So
Yeah.
the people of work. I'm sure you would, Imran, tell us the days when you go to work and you do something and feel like, wow, there's that aha moment when you feel like, oh, got it. How much
Absolutely.
have
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeling of success and excitement trickles into the rest of the day, but
right?
vice versa, right? If you have a bad day at work, it doesn't just stop when you leave the office. You end up, that seeps into the rest of your day. And so you can really start to see the negative side of not addressing some of these types of issues. And I appreciate you kind of giving us the perspective on how to change things as leaders and employers and as employees and people who can just take charge of our individual um, lives. So I think those are practical ways to look at this. And I feel like a lot of people might be in this transitionary period right now, where there has been a lot of stress in the workplace just because of how much things have changed in such a short time. So I think it's a recipe for a bit of turmoil, but it's like you said, I think there is an element of resilience that will come out of this as people continue to try to find their way through it. And there is so much potential to be seen here. Uh, and I agree. When people find that balance, I think that's when you see some really incredible things get accomplished. So I know we're pretty much out of time that I asked you for today, Anamika. So thank you for sharing these insights. I have one last quick question for you. I know you have to go in 2 minutes, and so do I, but what are your thoughts on something like the 4-day work week? Just you mentioned a really interesting concept with, going to the gym and coming back. And I'm just curious if you've thought of that one at all.
Well, so UAE has launched this four-way work week,
Oh,
4 day,
wow.
and it is a game changer. So we have 4.5 week actually, but the organizations are going to take some more time to understand how to actually implement it to see the benefit of it. So what has happened effectively is people are trying to squeeze a lot of work into this 4.5 week,
Uh,
right? Because they are looking at it as if this is a reward that you get for being burnt out. That's not how the equation needs to be. We need to be realistic about the work, expectations.
Huh.
We need to have a smoother distribution of work over the week. Again, see, I get to say this because I meet a lot of people. So I get
Yeah.
a lot of perspectives in my field, right? So what's the point of burning an employee over 4.5 days and then saying, hey, you get half a day off, and then a person's completely crashing, and you know what people do for recreation when they're in that
Yeah.
kind of,
It's so true.
it's not really beneficial. So we need to move away from what is known as fluffy employee well-being, where we are just doing things to showcase how good an employer we are. Sorry, we need to really look into it, because the whole point of a 4-day week should be that employees are able to maximize their potential, maximize their work in those 4 weeks by being given accountability and a bit of freedom to the way they can work. And
Yeah.
so let's be target oriented instead of micromanaging that 4.5 day. And then let them relax over the next 2 days. And this is something they've earned. So a lot of employees have been telling me, like, they sometimes feel that their HR, their employer, is making them feel as if they're doing them a great favor, and they kind of, they don't like it,
Yeah.
right?
I see what
So
you mean.
yeah, so it needs to be done because we believe in it, and we believe that people deserve it. And that then with that kind of approach and attitude, we can do more. So I'll just, before we finish, I'll give you a quick example of what we did with an organization recently. So this organization is going through a lot of changes right now. Okay. And so a lot of employees were complaining, a lot of them were quitting, and so on and so forth. So we got them together in a room and informed them that this is not going to be a complaining session, and let's find solutions, and let's come up with how we can improve our workspaces. And we also did a lot of reflective work with them. Towards the end, we had people sitting in circles on tables, actually pouring their heart out and trying to not only identify the problem, but find solutions. And then the leaders actually collected those solutions, and they saw a policy change with consultation of psychologists and other professionals within a month. And
Wow.
that's doable, right? I saw it happening in front of my own eyes.
Well,
And so I'm looking
that's
to a next session with them to see, like, how has it impacted them on the ground. So
and
this is something which is doable.
that is amazing. And maybe the next time we have you on, Anamika, if you'll join us again, we can get into some of that in more detail, because I would love to hear the results of that and the impact on it. But thank you so much for your time today, for joining us. I know it's late where you are, so I will let you go. And again, we truly appreciate hearing your stories and insights today. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening and that we see you again soon.
See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
And you.